Good evening, Tansei Anine. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. A feasibility study on searching Winnipeg landfills for missing Indigenous women has found it is possible. Now, Indigenous leaders and family members say there's no time to waste in getting the work started. APTN's Leanne Sanders reports.
We should not have to march through the streets every 5th of May calling attention to the high rates of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kathy Merrick says it doesn't matter how long it takes or how much it costs. A search will be done. The AMC and families of 2 Indigenous victims of an alleged serial killer responded to a feasibility study on a landfill search for their bodies, which says it could take up to 3 years and cost $184 million to complete.
If a search is not carried out, it will demonstrate to all First Nations across Canada that this government condones the despairing act of disposing of First Nation women in landfills.
Cambria Harris is the daughter of one of the women believed to have been disposed of in Prairie Green Landfill last year. She says money should not be a consideration.
This feasibility study is 55 pages long, and as it should be, but no amount of words on paper can give you enough reasons as to why you should search for our woman, because it should have been done on the first page. We will no longer be told what is and what is not feasible, because you cannot put a price on human life.
The study came after Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smythe said in December that a search of the landfills for the victims could not be done.
The circumstances, combined with the safety hazard, form the basis of a difficult decision not to go forward with a search at Prairie Green.
Kira Wilson, the chief of Long Plain First Nation, where Morgan Harris was from, repeated the message that Indigenous leaders will get this work done.
We are going to do that work with or without you. And if you're going to support us, we appreciate that. We're grateful for that. And if you're not, then get out of the way.
According to the Harris family, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller asked them what their stance is after digesting the report, which details the hazards of doing a search. Harris's cousin had harsh words for the minister.
Actually, I was kind of appalled that he would even ask such a question. Where was our family stance? Where did we stand after receiving this report and reading it and digesting it and picking it apart, to really ask us if we still wanted to go forward? I just can't even imagine. To think that we were going to say, oh no, it's okay, we're going to leave Morgan there. Absolutely not. It's disgusting.
The study was released just ahead of Mother's Day. Jordan Myron, the sister of Mercedes Myron, who is another one of the women thought to be in the landfill.
Breaks my heart that I don't have a grave to take my niece and nephew to this Mother's Day. It's really hard to tell them that I have nowhere to take them.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller were in Nain, Labrador today. They took questions about the release of the Winnipeg landfill study.
Minister Miller has been closely engaged with the Manitoba Chiefs, with local leadership and the Indigenous communities. As we've said from the very beginning, the federal government will be there to support in this grieving and healing process. We know how atrocious and how difficult this is for the families, and we will do whatever we can to help.
This could take many years. There is a risk to human life for those searching potentially toxic sites, so that all has to be properly planned, and that is work that will go on over the next little while. Yes, it's a substantial amount of money, but as the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs said, what signal do you send if you don't search for First Nations bodies that have been disposed as if they were trash, which they are absolutely not, and they're sacred and they're to be honored in that context.
And with Prime Minister Trudeau visiting the Inuit community of Nain, Labrador for the first time, as APTN's Annette Francis reports, it wasn't all photo ops, there was work involved.
With handshakes and hugs, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his son Hadrian were welcomed into a meeting room. Inuit Tapir Kanatami President Natan Obed began his opening remarks with this a long time in the making.
I've been inviting the Prime Minister to my hometown of Nunavut since 2015.
Nain is located in Labrador on the north side of Unity Bay on a small inlet, and the site of this year's meeting between the Prime Minister and the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee. On the agenda were 14 ongoing issues such as housing, health, and wellness. Trudeau says the momentous meeting provides leadership and community members an opportunity to meet face to face.
So much of reconciliation, as we talk about, involves not just figuring out all the answers in Ottawa, but making sure that we're figuring them out in partnership with people right across the country.
Following the meeting, the Prime Minister met with reporters, where he was asked how the proposed gun control legislation would affect local hunters and Inuit who rely on wild game for sustenance.
We will always respect Section 35 rights, and that includes the right of Inuit people to hunt and fish and to live off the land. Nothing in our gun legislation will limit or abrogate those rights. To make sure of that, we're taking extra time to engage directly with Indigenous communities.
Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A campaign to end violence against women and children held its 12th annual gathering in Victoria, British Columbia. Our APTN's Teen House was there and has this story.
12 years ago, father and daughter Raven and Paula Surt were on a family hunting trip along the Highway of Tears in northern BC, and they had a discussion about violence against women and children. That's when the Lissert family decided to launch a campaign to end violence against women and children and called it the Moose Hide Campaign.
We were blessed with the moose. We tanned it up, cut that hide up into a bunch of little squares and asked people to wear it as their everyday commitment and their everyday reminder that we don't want to do violence in our lives, that we want safe communities for women and children across the country.
And their call to action has been heard loud and clear. Over 2,000 people took to the streets of downtown Victoria to march to the lawn of the BC Legislature. Joining them was BC Premier David Eby, who made his own personal pledge.
I want to join everyone here today as a man in making my commitment personally to doing the work to end gender-based violence and racism, and also to join with all the boys and men here that are making that commitment. I know as Premier of a government, we have an added responsibility. I have an added responsibility that our government does all we can to end racism and violence.
Palahelsia, Lorelei Williams and her dance group Butterflies in Spirit were there to perform. But first, some of her butterflies, who all represent someone that they loved, who is either still missing or is found murdered, addressed the crowd.
I represent my relative Angeline Pete. She went missing in May 2011.
Tansa, hello, my name is Madeline. Traditional name is Sukaski Squeal, Strong Earth Woman, and I'm here representing Georgina Papin, who was found on the Picton farm, and she was my street mom. Hi, all my relations.
Hi there, my traditional name is Odemengizaskwe, which means Strawberry Moon Woman, and I'm here representing my mother and whose name I share with, Sarah DeVries.
And then it was time for them to share their original song and dance. The Moose Hide campaign has now given out over 4 million Moose Hide pins across Canada. Tina House, APTN National News, Victoria.
A dispute between the federal and territorial governments and Nunavut Tungavik Inc. over Inuit employment continues. In a hearing today, arbitrator Constance Hunt found the government has failed to live up to a key promise in the Nunavut Land Agreement and ordered the parties back to the table. Article 23 covers Inuit representation in the public sector jobs at all levels of government. It is just one part of the Nunavut Land Agreement signed in 1993. While Inuit represent 85% of all residents in the territory, they make up just 50% of the workforce, a number that goes down at higher level jobs. NTI proposed a range of solutions, including monetary damages, but ultimately their goal is to increase Inuit employment as outlined in Article 23. The parties now continue a 60-day period to hammer out a deal. And Nunavut's premier said in a statement, in part, that the territory is continuing to develop Inuit training plans, including creating more associate deputy minister positions to bring more Inuit into leadership roles. All right, we have to step aside briefly. We'll have more news still to come. Stick around. Welcome back to APTN National News. Our Truth and Politics panel joined Dennis Ward once again, this time to pass the puck around on what an American sportscaster said during an NHL playoff game between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Edmonton Oilers. Vegas defenseman Zach Whitecloud scored a goal, and ESPN's John Anderson said, quote, "Whitecloud, what kind of name is that? A great name if you're a toilet paper," end quote. Whitecloud is from the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation in Manitoba.
Carrie, Negon, great to have you with us as always. Carrie, comparing someone's last name to toilet paper in front of potentially millions of sports fans, so what are your thoughts on that?
I think that was very disrespectful. And I think that there is a lack of Indigenous training when it comes to Indigenous people in general in sports, because we haven't been in this area for very long. We've had Fred Sasakamoose. There aren't many Indigenous players, especially ones that are carrying names like White Cloud. This name is very special to him because it's his grandfather's name. People don't realize that a lot of Indigenous people, we've lost our traditional names like White Cloud. My name, for example, is Benjo, and it was basically an insult from the Indian agent. My great-great-grandfather, when he was signing up, they asked him what his name was, and he said, at school they called me Benjamin, at the church they called me Joseph. And he said, what, you don't even know your own name? Okay, you're Benjo. And so that's my name. I don't have a connection to my traditional name. It is just a insult that was passed on to me because of an Indian agent. And so our last names are very important for him to have his name out there for his family, for his community. It brings pride to his community. It brings pride to Indigenous people in general to see our traditional names out there, and to have somebody compared to toilet paper was very insulting.
Niigaan, does it matter that there is an actual toilet paper brand in the U.S. called White Cloud, or does that make it worse?
That wasn't a question I expected, but I guess I don't think it matters, of course. I mean, this has become a almost international issue. I mean, Mark Ruffalo, the Incredible Hulk, best known in the Marvel movies, tweeted about this, said it was unacceptable and inappropriate, and he said what all of us have been thinking. But kudos to Zach for doing such an incredible sort of dignified job embodying our traditions and reaching out to this announcer in a kind and good way to both teach, but then also to instruct that this was inappropriate and offensive. Anyone who has a traditional name, I carry the name Niigaan Waiwadam. I mean, that has been both a blessing for me in my journey as an Anishinaabe person, but it's also been very difficult to walk in this world where people are constantly either mispronouncing or making fun of it or saying, why do I got to say that silly name? I mean, I've even been at the border one time where the U.S. crossing guard looked at my name and said, what kind of name is that? And that's probably not the place to make a stand. But there was Zach Whitecloud on national media being generous and kind, and what an incredible role model for our communities, and especially for young hockey players, both female and male, growing up. That's the kind of person that you want to emulate. The reality is that this is part of a long-standing issue of colonialism, seeing our names, our peoples, our rights as lesser than, and we constantly battle with this, even trying to get our driver's licenses in our traditional names. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's something that's ongoing, and something that we certainly will not see the end of immediately.
Carrie, Zach's response has been praised. Anderson didn't come out and face questions from the media about this. Should he have?
Definitely. He was out there. He said it. He should be out there in the public giving a very public response. Zach came out there and it was emotional. I seen the questions and I could tell it hurt him. It hurt him deeply, but still he was being kind and being generous and answering questions. Yet Anderson got off by just issuing an apology. I think he should come forward and face media, face the cameras, and put his face out there and say sorry and get grilled by media.
Right. Carrie, Niigaan, we'll leave it there for this week, but as always, appreciate seeing you and having your opinions shared.
Yeah, Miiglaach, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we have to step aside one final time. Our photo of the day and weather are next. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Vincent Bonnet took this picture of a caribou in Carcross Tagish First Nation territory in the Yukon. That's such a great photo, Vincent. Thanks so much for sending that in. And we hope you didn't have to get too close for that photo. We want to see your great photos. You can send them to share@aptn.ca, and your photo might just be our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning on the East Coast, 15 in St. John's and 19 in rain in Halifax. 2 degrees in Kuujjuaq and 9 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 22 degrees in Quebec City and 25 in rain in Montreal. Clear and 22 degrees in Toronto and 18 in North Bay. 16 degrees and clear in Wawa and 11 and clear in Big Trout Lake. Clear and 22 in Churchill and 22 in The Paw. A mix of sun and cloud at 16 in Barons River and 22 in Winnipeg. 18 degrees in Regina and 26 in North Battleford. Clear and 26 in Buffalo Narrows and 29 in Stony Rapids. As we head west, at 27 and clear in Fort Chipewyan and 28 in Peace River. Clear and 25 in Edmonton and 23 and clear in Calgary. Campbell River is looking at 29 degrees and clear and 25 in Bella Coola. 16 degrees in Prince Rupert and 14 and some rain in Dease Lake. 16 in Whitehorse and rain and 6 in Rock River. Clear and 20 in Norman Wells and 25 in Fort Simpson. 6 degrees in Inuvik and 13 in Colville Lake. -1 in Cambridge Bay and 18 in Arviat. -2 in Igloolik and -3 in Iqaluit. Well, the warmer weather in Winnipeg has brought people outdoors. At the Air Canada Window Park, a Yukon artist has been selling his artwork while enjoying the sunshine. APTN's Leanne Sanders has more.
Hailing from Teslin and using his traditional name, Walking Wolf, he creates detailed art with pens. The artist has retired from decades of working on ships and is now making his way home after landing in Halifax.
This is Native Phoenix Rising, aka Butterfly. Everything I do has a story, it has to have a meaning.
You can see him on Portage Avenue, and aside from his art, he has many stories to tell. One piece he's proud to show off, his version of the Canadian flag, inspired by the 215 unmarked graves found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School.
So I wanted this to go so that the eagle would bring his wing down and swoop the children back, because they are the seeds that give us the information that we need. So this is the maple leaf, and I think that's a better Canadian flag.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
On APTN Investigates, we meet with 2 mothers who are looking for babies they say they were told had died shortly after birth. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations has asked the RCMP to investigate. With more on the story, we are joined now by reporter Christopher Reed. Christopher, thanks for joining us here today. It's always great to chat with you. First off, how did this story come to your attention?
Well, a woman named Melvina Bear, originally from Witchican Lake First Nation, reached out to us, and her story goes kind of like this. In 1982, she's 16 years old. She goes into the Battlefords Union Hospital in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. She's complaining about abdominal pain. Turns out she's pregnant. She gives birth. They tell her that her son might be moved to Saskatoon overnight because there are concerns. They give Melvina Bear medicine to put her to sleep, she says. She's awakened at some point in the middle of the night, and she says they tell her that her baby died, and then they get her to sign forms in her bed. Of course, she's sad. Eventually, she moves on with her life until at some point, a few years later, she notices that her son's name is on the Witchican Lake ban list. And this upsets her, and in order to have the name removed, she goes in search of proof of his death. First, she calls vital stats. They say, we have record of birth, but no record of death. This floors her. So Following that, she calls Indigenous Services, and they tell her someone associated with the same status number Melvina Bair's son was born under and the same birth date applied for a status card in 2000 when Melvina's son would have turned 18.
Wow, that's quite the story, Christopher. And then, okay, so what do we think happened to Melvina Bair's son?
Well, we don't know, but I did find a news story from 1989 about a woman in Saskatchewan who had refused to put her son up for adoption. And so she had been told by social workers that her baby had died. But in reality, they secretly adopted the child out. So there is some speculation that because Melvina was 16 and unwed, that someone decided her baby would be better off apprehended and adopted out.
Okay, so the federal government has a name. Are they putting Melvina Bair in touch with this person who may be her son?
Well, in a word, no, not so far. Anyway, APTN Investigates has taken this up to the ministerial level with our inquiries, and we're told that Indigenous Services is going to try to assist Melvina Bair, but due to privacy legislation concerns, they haven't acted. We hope they're going to make a reunion possible. And in the meantime, we're going to keep looking into this phenomenon and look for more women this may have happened to.
Well, that's certainly an interesting story, Christopher. Thanks so much for updating us on this.
Thank you.
APTN Investigates stolen airs a few minutes from now, immediately following APTN National News. And that is all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. If you missed anything from our show tonight or throughout the week, aptnnews.ca has you covered. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, Kinanaskmitten, and have a great night.